Corporations control the daily life of nearly every citizen within the dark future, to the point in which your only chance of survival encountering a cyber psycho is to either have trauma team coverage on standby or be chromed up by a biocorp. Unless you're Morgan Blackhand, of course, which you're not. Biocorporations are those that specialize in augmentation, whether it be mechanical or biological. They're the corps behind producing and developing everything from bioware, cyberware, and biosculpting technologies, such as Alt Cunningham's European sculpting, to even GMO crops, biofuels like Chew2, and much, much more. In my previous Cyberpunk lore video, I covered the most prominent biocorp, Biotechnica, a quote-unquote good guy corp that has taken large strides in aiding humanity, yet still maintains the corruption and inhumanity expected from a corporation. Today, we will be shifting our perspective to an entirely different umbrella of corporations, the Arma Corps, those that specialize in security and private military contracting with operations across the globe. While your mind might immediately shift to the likes of the public-facing rivals, Arasaka and Militech Arms International, there's a third considered to be their successor, the Lazarus Military Operations Group, a megacorporation entirely focused on private military contracting, ranging from single operatives to entire armored divisions. Their participation in several wars during the 2010s, including the Third Corporate War, spread their name and formed a reputation of reliability and quality. As of 2020, they had as many as 270,000 active employees, and even affiliation with Militech. So just what is this elite Lazarus Corporation, and where do they come from in order to rank amongst Arasaka and Militech? This video is the history and unraveling of the truth behind the 21st century's dominant corporate mercenary force, the Lazarus Military Operations Group. Let's begin. The year is 2003. In the dead center of the Second South American conflict of North Venezuela, sprinted a U.S. Army Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel by the name of Emil Lazarus. This was, however, not a day of conditioning and leisure waiting for his next orders. He was in the thick of not only tropical mud, but a war zone that rained mortar shells onto his position, casting shrapnel with every explosion. The air was opaque with rain, making it difficult for Emil to navigate his only chance at survival. What mattered most was he could now make out the shape of a sandbag entrance directly in front of him. He dove behind cover, into the safety of a bunker held by his allies, just barely avoiding the ensuing hail of small arms fire that erupted from the tree line. Seconds later, his own troops began answering in kind from the bunker. What he now found himself in was an advanced base he had dropped in only a week before, along with a company of airborne troops, to reinforce and take command of the base and its depleted battalion. He was told that amphibious forces landing at Ports de la Cruz would reach the base within days and secure the area. In the meantime, air support was to be available on demand. The week had passed, yet the promised amphibious troops had bogged down in heavy fighting in Barcelona City. His advanced base was alone and under vicious attack. He had no other choice. Emil Lazarus grabbed the nearest CelluCom.net phone receiver from a young, wide-eyed operator. He punched up the brigade air support net and spoke in code. 4Com Frisbee. 4Com Frisbee. This is Grasshopper. Over. In reply, a 5-second eternity of nothing but satellite hiss. Lazarus yelled into the handset over and over, yet only received silence. He swore and reached for his next best option, a ComNet selector, meaning to break orders and switch directly over to the Naval Air ComNet. In this moment, his hand was jolted by a crackling voice. There was a flurry of distortion as the military ComNet computers struggled to overcome the satellite jamming signal. Say again, Grasshopper. This is Frisbee. Do you copy? This was the reply he had been waiting for. Relief swept through Lazarus as he got his message in order. Yes, this is Grasshopper. I copy. It's about time. I need air support. We got at least 5 companies of Venezuelan regulars in the tree line off our south perimeter, requesting air AP delivery ASAP. Grid coordinates as follows. Grasshopper, be advised. Repeat. Grid coordinates as follows. 6-3 marks Grasshopper. The sharp tone of the voice had brought Lazarus up short. The voice continued. Be advised, no air support is available at this time. Lazarus jerked the handset away from his ear and stared at it. It must be a wrong number. Somehow, some way he had connected to a separate line, or had been intercepted. These thoughts did little to quell the dread that was already swelling within him. Say again, Frisbee? I repeat, no air support available. All naval aircraft were ordered to the Paraguay Peninsula. There was a brief moment of silence, where even the sounds of battle and his own adrenaline-spiked heartbeat seemed to fade. All of it only worked to amplify his explosion of anger. What the hell do you mean no support? I was guaranteed naval air on demand when we dropped in this hellhole. We're in imminent danger of being wiped out. I repeat, no air support. Divert some of the airplanes. Apologies, Grasshopper. No immediate air support is available. Be advised, complete air evacuation from your position will begin in 8 hours. Sit tight till then. Frisbee out. The receiver clicked dead, seeming to signify the death of trust in his own country. No air support. Evac in 8 hours? Had their whole landing been a diversion? The only thing the AVs and Ospreys could be carrying out of this base were body bags. All he could do was keep as many of his men alive as possible. So, he unslung the unreliable government-issued FN-SAF assault rifle and strode out of the bunker. 8 hours later, Lieutenant Colonel Emil Lazarus and 37 other survivors were airlifted out. 512 dead were left behind. Say what you will, but Lazarus was no pushover. He had graduated top of his class, and his advancement in the army had been rapid as he distinguished himself in a number of operations. Even after the debacle in Venezuela, Lazarus could never forsake the life of a soldier, nor could he forget the sense of betrayal and abandonment he felt towards the United States government, or his resentment at the incompetence that had riddled the American military forces in South America. He followed this disappointment with a resignation. This was a sentiment he didn't share alone. The majority of those enlisted during the Second Central American War felt the same exact betrayal and disappointment. Those who were previously prideful and loyal to the USA now felt only hatred. Even well-renowned rocker boy Johnny Silverhand felt the devastation left behind by the conflict. Realizing the war was run by a corrupt and manipulative government, he was one of many to desert the military and turn toward a life of rebellion. Lazarus, while not for the flailing US government, wanted to continue being a soldier. His experimentation with mercenary organizations only fed him further ineptitude and disappointment, while those, like the famed solo Morgan Blackhand, would choose the route of serving for a corporation. Lazarus could not think of anything worse. So, he returned to the US in 2008 from his failed journey. Around the same time, a wealthy businessman by the name Nelson Katsoulis would set out to create a mercenary organization that could offer a variety of high-quality services. This was in response to second-rate mercenary forces of that time, when quality tended to be low, and most corporations that licensed military forces did it as an afterthought, reserving their best men and equipment for strictly in-house use. Katsoulis hired a marketing firm to do a survey, and the ultimate judge was that a dedicated military contracting organization would be financially viable. Despite having the money and statistics, he knew nothing about how to lead a military force, so his first acquisition would have to be a military expert, one who could oversee the recruitment, training, and equipping of a fine military force. After surveying and file reviews, Emil Lazarus would be selected as chief military consultant with, of course, an unknown offer he couldn't refuse. Since Lazarus was a military coordinator and an honored war hero renowned in military circles, his was the name that went on the letterhead, while Katsoulis remained a silent partner who would take care of corporate finances. Thus was born the Lazarus Military Operations Group, or the Lazarus Group for short. By the year 2010, the first training facilities were built. Thanks to a marketing campaign sweeping the nation for several months, anyone who thought he or she had the guts and the fortitude for a life of military adventure was encouraged to check out Lazarus. The first group of recruits to be filtered through consisted of 5,000 trainees who received 8 weeks of training from experts in equipment and tactics. Much of the equipment used by the Lazarus Group would actually come from its competitor and ally, Militech, from whom the Lazarus Group would purchase millions of dollars worth of equipment annually going forward, the result of a mutually beneficial exclusivity/endorsement contract with Militech, meaning that Lazarus uses Militech equipment whenever possible and makes sure that the equipment is visible in ads and films of Lazarus combat actions, and in return, the group receives Militech's typically high-quality merchandise in bulk for a substantial discount. Soon enough, the Lazarus Group began contracting only 8 weeks after the first recruits arrived at the main base in Montana. Operations were small at first, with teams of the more experienced Lazarus mercenaries licensed out to run some extractions and other black operations for contracting corporations, while recently graduated Green troops were hired for some international urban peacekeeping missions and reinforcements. The success and efficiency ratings of the Lazarus military teams were extremely high, and a reputation for fine service, confidentiality, and value began to grow. The organization went on to participate in the Central African conflicts of 2013, urban unrest of 2014, Third Corporate War of 2016, and European brushfire wars of 2018. Since its inception in 2010, the Lazarus Group had grown consistently throughout these conflicts. Though it had crossed some swords with corporations such as Arasaka, Net54, Orbital Air, and even Petrochem, it was proving to be much more financially lucrative than initially expected. It was even the most successful and largest military service contracting organization in the world as of 2020. The period of history from 2021 to 2025 would see one of the largest world conflicts at play, the Fourth Corporate War, a global conflict between the two aquacorps, Sino and OTEC, who later hired Arasaka and Militech respectively to fight on their behalf. Despite the Eurobank stepping in and stopping the war, Arasaka and Militech continued past their now cancelled contracts, running increasing amounts of covert ops on each other, losing personnel and property. At this time, Lazarus had remained the largest corporate mercenary force of the 21st century, even above Militech, who held the title of dominance in military production. Their expertise were so sought after that Militech directly hired on James B. Woodland from Lazarus, arguably one of the best naval commanders the world had ever seen. It was during this shadow war that the likes of Militech and Morgan Blackhand would hire on additional support from the Lazarus Group, allowing itself an ocean war team that would have a certain deniability from themselves. Things began to change on June 9th, 2022, when the hot war would begin between Arasaka and Militech. Decades of bad blood between the two corporations had finally come to a head. No more saving face or pulling punches were involved. It was an all-out war between the two corps. The Lazarus Group found itself in a bit of a situation as a result of this escalation. There is now a choice being forced onto them, to fully commit to the war or sit it out. In response, a briefing was called into action in the Officers Club of the Lazarus Military and Strategic Studies Foundation. The head of the foundation, Dr. Robican, presided over the assemblage. His analytic and academic skills in the field of military, political, and strategic science are unrivaled. And for this reason, he had been given the task of deciding the fate of Lazarus, if it would partake in the Fourth Corporate War or sit it out. There was Major Eddington, the Intel Div liaison head, Ted Manning, and some of the sharpest minds the Lazarus Group had at its disposal. It would certainly be needing them now. A brief recap would be provided to all in the room of what had led up to this point in the war. Then, it was time to discuss the predictions and intelligence the group had compiled thus far. The general consensus of the Lazarus Group and those outside of the warring corps was that Militech and Arasaka were locked in a war over pride and ego. The two were essentially committing financial suicide, aiming to attack each other's assets until one was grinded into submission. it was wholly more likely that both would be forced into financial disaster without benefiting at all from the war. Colonel Llewellyn saw the war as a decision on which leader would win, Saburo Arasaka or Donald Lundy. He personally held worries that if a war went on due to Militech's lower supply of soldiers in the conflict, the world would smash Militech, and Lazarus would be caught in the overkill, possibly being forcibly integrated into the United States Army through nationalization. He urged for action to shut down the war through the brute strength and numbers Lazarus held over the two corporations. They had more troops than Arasaka and Militech combined, and the logistics to support a blitzkrieg around the world. The room had fell silent to consider what he had said. However, Ted Manning was a man of statistics and objective truth. He ran a crawl up on the large screen they had been using to discuss intel, showing the various contracts made in the past 6 weeks. Each and every one of them had been a defense contract. Protect assets from any attack. With Militech and Arasaka busy chipping at each other, they can't be relied on to honor security contracts. Clients had already begun dropping Arasaka security contracts for fear it makes them a valid Militech target. Lazarus just so happened to be the last trusted mercenary corporation in the world, allowing them to pick up the pieces. So, it was clear that the one who benefited the most from this war, without even participating, was the Lazarus Group itself. As the war continued and worsened, the more contracts Lazarus would have at its disposal. It certainly seemed like a no-brainer, as the bottom line for a mercenary has always been maintaining the unit and filling the cash box, not getting mixed up in personal quarrels. With only Colonel Llewellyn in opposition, Dr. Robican had made his decision. He would advise Colonel Lazarus and Mr. Katsoulis to remain out of the war. The meeting was adjourned with this revelation, and was certainly a sigh of relief for members all over Lazarus. In fall of 2022, the governments of Southern California and Republic of Texas both nationalized all Arasaka and Militech facilities within their borders. Following suit, both the European Economic Community and Japan began nationalizing all facilities within their own and seizing all possible assets. With Arasaka local assets under the control of the Japanese government, the United States moved to end the global conflict. President Elizabeth Kress, the ex-Militech president, reactivated the Commission of Militech CEO Donald Lundy to work with the government. Under Lundy's command, Militech forces ceased all active offensive operations, a decision Lundy was not happy with. The global war was effectively over. However, there were still Arasaka facilities and operatives in the Western Hemisphere. President Kress wanted to completely remove Arasaka from North America for her own personal goals, as well as for the benefit of Militech. So, a plan was formed. On August 20th, 2023, a small nuclear device was detonated somewhere in the Arasaka towers by a strike team led by Morgan Blackhand, meaning the last known pocket of Arasaka resistance was cleaned out of the US and the hot war was over. But it wasn't until 2025 that Militech and national armies of the US finally quelled all the pockets of fighting across the country, and the Fourth Corporate War was declared as officially over. Meaning that the war ended and Arasaka nationalized into a Japan-only company for the next decade, and Militech and its assets being nationalized in order to strengthen the new United States. It was because of their neutrality that Lazarus remained the world's strongest corporate military force, and not only helped them take over new contracts, but maintain their resources and reputation, as well as avoid being nationalized by the NUSA. By 2045, Lazarus Security was considered the heir to Arasaka and Militech status as the largest security service in Night City, employing thousands of rent-a-cops that patrol urban areas, office blocks, and upscale living areas. While Lazarus Security is a subsidiary of the Lazarus Group, the corporation maintains their presence across the globe, a luxury Arasaka no longer maintained, at least not publicly. It's actually the period from 2045 to 2077 that seems to act as a black box to us. In this time period, only 2077 and its shards can be relied on to piece together the story. However, there's only one mention made of the Lazarus Group. It can be found in a WNS article, reading, "An investigation is underway into the cause of a mysterious shootout in Japantown. According to sources, the NCPD found the body of Lazarus agents on the scene. The lone survivor claims that the attacker was a portly man with the black cyberarm." End quote. While this article doesn't tell us much, it at the bare minimum confirms that Lazarus is still present within Night City and 2077. This overall article has been speculated since launch to be about Morgan Blackhand. I find as we inch closer to Phantom Liberty that it might actually be Kurt Hansen, the leader of Dogtown's militia. He definitely fits the description of a portly man with a black cyberarm, much more so than Morgan Blackhand, who Mike Pondsmith has stated is actually much thinner by the year of 2045 and on. So this definitely sets up the possibility that Lazarus appears within the new expansion, going on the assumption that this attacker is Kurt Hansen. It would mean that Lazarus has possibly been contracted by Militech or Night City as further help. Either that, or Lazarus has a personal quarrel with Hansen and his militia. It's just difficult to say with such a limited amount of information. It's likely that we'll learn more on Lazarus with the addition of the Edgerunner's mission kit, but its release date is yet to be announced. So our best bet currently is Phantom Liberty. We don't have much longer, chooms. Yet again though, this is all debate, but I want to hear what you all think down below. This was the unraveling and truth behind the world's strongest corporate military, the Lazarus Military Operations Group. I hope you all enjoyed and learned some new information to further your knowledge of the Cyberpunk universe. This video utilized Cyberpunk 2020, Red, and the Corporation Report 2020 Volume 2 as sources. I've been having fun compiling all the lore I can for these new videos, so I hope to get as many of these out as possible ahead of 2.0 and Phantom Liberty. Make sure to subscribe and check out my other content if you haven't already. As always, a huge thanks to all the channel members up on screen. I appreciate all your support and the great interactions you all provide. I'm just grateful to be a part of the community and a content creator for you all as well. Make sure to have a great week, and I will see you later, chooms.